Hello and welcome to In Conversation with Bruce Pirrie. I'm Jimmy MacKinley. I claim to be a comedian, and I was asked to host this session. So thank you for having me with the Silver Wave Film Festival. I feel honored to be here virtually in my bachelor apartment in Miramichi, New Brunswick. So again, honored to be here, and I'm very much honored to have a hopefully 45-minute conversation. It could go longer. We could be here till supper time, and nobody is being paid. So we're going to do our best to keep this on the rails. I have 4 questions for this very talented gentleman. So we're going to try to keep them to 10 minutes. And if there's some questions from the audience, I will try my best to answer them on Zoom with my iPhone 8, which is propped up on a box of oatmeal right now in my kitchen island. So without further ado, I do want to introduce a man. I haven't seen a turtleneck like this in many, many years, since I was in the 6th grade, but I'm very excited to have him here virtually. He's worked with all the greats in Canadian comedy, such as John Candy, Mike Myers, the comedian, not the killer from the Halloween films, Eugene Levy. I had Eugene Levy on here twice for some reason, Colin Mockery, and Robin Williams. Please welcome a guy that's certainly made a mark and is continuing to make a mark in the Canadian comedy writing and directing world. Please welcome Mr. Bruce Pirrie, everybody. Yes.
Thank
Are
you.
you with us, Bruce?
I am indeed. Thank you.
What
Yes.
could go wrong with these Zoom calls? Nothing.
I'll find a way.
Yeah. Yeah. So welcome. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank Kat and Tony for inviting me to be part of the Silver Wave Film Festival as well. So,
yes, sir. Yeah. So welcome. We're very happy to have you all the way from. Well, you're still in Toronto, but
Toronto. I'm in Toronto.
A Zoom call. So yeah. And Kat warned us before that all the other conference calls have gone perfectly until So
now
until now. So the pressure's on. We're wearing a blazer, we're wearing turtlenecks. So we're going to get started, and we're going to try to keep this to 45 minutes. We're going to do our best. So let's just get started with question number 1. So getting a start in show business. So if you looked at show business from a different perspective than most people look at it, as we had a conversation before, what would you go back and tell your 12-year-old self about sort of how to look at it and how to get started in this seemingly impossible business to get started in?
Well, I think what I would do is just a little bit of background to nobody in my family had ever been in show business or in entertainment. My father was a truck driver and my mother was a public school secretary. So I didn't have any sort of model to work with. I didn't, there was nobody I could ask for,
no formula.
Get any kind of like common sense business suggestions other than don't throw your life away by running away and joining the circus. But my parents were very open to letting me do it. And but at 12, what I would say to myself is what I would say to myself now. Don't worry about it. What will happen, but treat it like it's any other job, whether you're a freelance plumber, long distance truck driver, whatever you would do as a freelance person who's working for yourself, being your own boss. You are creating a product that you're trying to sell, and a lot of that product is you. There's that terminology that I don't like, but it's.
What do you mean by that?
The terminology is a brand. You have to be your own brand. You have to, or you're providing a service or a talent, and you have to do your best to cultivate that and to make people aware of what it is that you do. And it's no real mystery. It's like, as I say, if you were going to be my father was a truck driver, but he worked for a company. But if you were independent, you would have to advertise. You would have to continually keep updating your skills. You would have to be aware of the technology that was affiliated with what you were doing. And you have to keep doing that. I think there's a tendency to think that show is some sort of magical place where the rules don't seem to apply. But Jimmy, I mean, how do you get gigs? How do you create a profile for yourself? You have to go out and do it, right?
It is, yeah. So it's very much similar. And it took, for me, I found it took many years, because the first time I went on stage, October 6, 2011, I don't know why I know the exact date and time, but it took so many years to sort of test material out and sort of string the jokes that work for most audiences together. So I do agree with most of what you're saying, but I would say that, for acting gigs and performing gigs, there's never been a shortage of people. Like there's job postings for truck drivers, there's job postings for welders, and obviously when you market yourself, you'll come in contact with agents and managers and things like that. But the one thing I do find about this industry that's difficult, and everything's difficult, is there's never going to be a shortage of people that are looking to be on TV. So, when my agent met me in Halifax, Dartmouth, she wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy beforehand. So she sort of did a little background check. But I guess you can relate that to any other job, really. I mean, if I was going to be a welder, there's interviews and there's schooling and you got to market yourself. And so I do like that perspective. So creating your own opportunities.
Yes. And it's also, this is in a state of flux.
Work.
Started out, there were 3 television networks in Canada, Global, CBC, and CTV. And if you wanted to pitch an idea for a television show, you went to them.
The big 3. Yeah.
It is wide open. It's the Wild West. Instead, in lieu of going to television networks, you have to create as what I understand now, you have to create an online presence, and you have to create material to keep feeding the machine. And when you feed the machine with your material, you're also building up your own
right.
Your own reputation.
Yeah.
Because that's really what you have in this business is a reputation, and you have to look after that too.
Well, it's true of any industry. Yeah.
One time I was doing one of these many years ago. It was at a writing workshop, and I was at Second City, and I was taking questions, and one chap at the front said to me, first question was, well, I guess you have to move to the States in order to make it.
Yeah.
If you're going to make it in the States, you certainly have to go to the States to make it.
Okay.
Said, it is possible. And now this might be good news. You could tell, if you have to justify your choice of career to people, it is possible in Canada and maybe other countries as well, make a living without being a superstar or without being accosted on the street. You don't have to be famous to have a great life working in Canadian show business. Because I said to this fellow who asked me about, I said to him, well, define your terms. What do you mean make it? And he goes, well, make it. What, a limo waiting for you when you get up in the morning?
Yeah. You don't?
I managed buy a house, keep a roof over my head and my family's head, send my daughter to university.
Right.
Where not studying show business.
Yeah.
And she's doing something good for the world, like social work.
Well, that's good.
And I was able to do that without lifting anything heavier than a pencil.
Right.
And you can make a living and do what you really love doing without all the trappings of what people would think show business involves. I mean, there are people who are musicians who they gig every week or they tour and they do the thing. They're not being chased down by fame. What was her name? Princess Leia, who was Carrie Fisher said. Carrie Fisher is one of the stupidest things you could ask for. It can happen, but there's we're Canadian famous. You've heard the phrase Canadian famous? It means you are, but you can make a living doing it. Yeah, that's really what I would tell myself. That treat it like a business, and you can make a living at it without all of the trappings that you would think. And I think too, just the reasons of, because I get a lot of those questions too. I mean, I'm certainly not. I don't have a resume as accomplished as yours, but
a lot of people ask me after shows, how do I get involved, and how do I tell jokes on stage? How do we get it? You just have to start doing it. But the reasons why you're doing something is equally important as what you're doing or why you're doing it. So if you're doing something, the reasons behind that. So if you're expecting to be, Eugene Levy or Robin Williams tomorrow, or someone who's, still alive. I know Eugene Levy's still alive. But if you want to be Vince Vaughn tomorrow and you're getting into this business, you're going to be awfully disappointed. Whereas people who are intrinsically motivated, will work 5 other jobs and focus in on what makes them happy. So I guess like what you're saying, create your own opportunities, but getting into things for the right reason. That's what I've seen in the past 7 years of me doing comedy and trying to get film work, and and I live in the East Coast, so there's like the weatherman job, and that's it.
Are grown just like potatoes on PEI. All the comedians in Canada from the East Coast. Well, the thing too, I think, is that there's a certain practicality about it, even though it seems like an impractical business to get into. There's a practical way to do it.
It can sometimes, yes.
From my point of view, looking back now on my career, which I wasn't sure I had, looking back from where you are, it looks like everything was a straight line that was leading you here. But when you're in the middle of it, you hardly know which way to turn or which way to go. So I managed to take my meager talents and spread them around. We'll get into some of the details of that when we run through this. But I think part of the thing too is people tend to say that they want to follow their dreams. And I heard a very trenchant comment about following your dreams. I said, don't follow your dreams, follow your talents.
Right.
I had a dream about being a fighter pilot, except, my eyes are bad, I'm afraid of heights, and I'm scared.
Sounds like a nightmare.
So the dream of being a fighter pilot was not going to happen because I have no talents in that area. And I managed to wind up, starting out as a comedian at Second City. And there were people who were way better at it than me. So I had to start finding out what else I could do. And I found I had a modicum of talent for writing and a modicum of talent for directing. So even within show business, I kept changing jobs or adding to my talents rather than just sitting at home dreaming, waiting for the limo to show up. So I think the point between your dreams and your talents, and I like talented at something. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So basically finding what you're good at and doubling down at that because it's already built inside of you, essentially. So everyone has dreams, but finding those talents and doubling down on those and growing with the industry as well. So you said that. So let's just keep this on the rails a little bit. We do have a question here. We may have already answered a quarter of it, but I really want to get people. I want to talk about your first major gig in show business.
Okay. All right.
Was that on stage at Second City?
It was indeed. Getting we assume
in what role?
It's an improv club started in Chicago.
Right.
Lots of very talented people have been through that. Their names are legion. Anyway, so it's in Toronto, and it was a friend of mine had given me a birthday present, which was to take 6 classes at Second City. I was currently working at the beer store in Toronto, which is always good to have.
Yeah.
A flexible part-time job before starting out, so that you can not starve to death, but they can also be flexible enough to give you time off to go to auditions or to pursue your talents.
Right.
So where was I? So I got these classes. So I went and took classes at Second City, and in the second class, at the end, the instructor said to me, "We'd like you to audition to get into Second City. Would you be interested in being in the touring company, which would lead you to being on stage, which then is, the goal to work at Second City?" So I said, yes. So I went in and I auditioned and failed miserably. I wasn't,
What happened? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, well, you go in and you have to do some quick improvs, and like you have to come in through the door as three different characters, one right after the other, which is actually very similar to what the Saturday Night Live auditions like, which
Right.
I didn't get either.
Yeah.
But
Lorne Michaels might be listening, so there's
yeah,
still a
well,
chance.
yeah. So,
He's not.
so I didn't get the job. So, or I didn't pass. I didn't pass the audition. So then it was like, well, okay, that's the end of that. Because the one thing about show business, if you want to find out if you're any good at it, people will let you know in the audience or at the audition or what have you. In case you're wondering, do I have enough talent to make it? Well, you got to throw it out there and try. And I threw it out there and nobody was buying.
Right.
So then I retreated, went back to the beer store. And a friend of mine said, so what now? You going to work at the beer store for the rest of your life? Well, I don't.
It's not a bad gig.
And this is another thing too. It's nice to have some people around. As I say, nobody in my family knew anything about this, but they didn't sort of stand in my way about this. So it was just something that I was trying. And besides, I had the beer store job. So, okay. So I was still too chicken to go back to Second City. So I heard about this children's theater, which is the other pathway to Canadian show business that most people have in common is you wind up going auditioning. You hear about children's theater jobs, and then you audition and you get in or you don't. Well, I got into children's theater, and I was a couple of the shows. You may recall Go Play in Traffic or the Summer Safety Show. Anyway, it was like getting up at 5 a.m. and going to public schools hungover and doing safety shows.
Yeah.
But it got me. I'm in a van and I'm driving around and I'm going to places and I'm gigging and I'm performing. But what if they were all 5 years old?
You're in the circle. Yeah.
You're starting.
I hear you.
You're discovering what your talents are, and you start making connections right away. Of the 5 people that were in my children's theater group, 3 of them are still at it and have very successful careers. You wouldn't know their names, but they've been doing what they love all of their adult life, and they've kept food on the table. So a success. So I was convinced, okay, go back to Second City. Okay, so I got everything it took to go back in there, and I took some more classes, the second round of classes, and they asked me to audition, and I did, and got in. Probably the year in children's theater certainly didn't hurt. It may have helped. So, one thing, you got to create another opportunity or look for something else to do. So then I started with Second City on December 8th, the same day John Lennon was murdered. So it was not a good, I got my first job in entertainment. So not a good day for entertainment in general. And I spent the next 18 months touring around Ontario with the people who were in the cast, which eventually came down to, it was included myself, Deborah McGrath, Ron James, and Mike Myers. We were all touring around Southern Ontario, playing gigs and keeping our eye on getting on main stage. So I eventually wind up on main stage, and Mike and Deborah and Ron James, we all wound up in the same cast in Toronto. And this was great. This is what a lot of people want to do, is to be on stage at Second City. And I was 24, and that's when I started there. So it was great. Every night, full houses. People. It took them 3 months to get a ticket to go to see it on a Saturday night. Always sold out. Everybody came to Second City. Casting directors came to Second City. The director of one of the Police Academy movies came to Second City, and I got hired out of. I was playing a policeman in one of the sketches on stage.
Oh, nice.
So, yes, I've been in one of the what are they called? Police Academy movies.
Yeah, you could just chalk it up to that. Yeah.
Number 3. So anyways, Second City was great. It was a great showcase. Everybody went there. All the casting directors, people would start, and I got an agent, and an agent is invaluable to getting professional acting gigs. And although that's changing now too, apparently, it's all done online. You can sell
on Zoom,
send these things. I have no idea what's on there anymore, but all I can say is you have to look into this, and you have to keep up with the technology of show business too.
Right.
So where was I? Second City.
You were touring around with Deborah and Mike and
right. And then I was on the main stage, and I got every commercial I went out for. I don't know
right.
why. I would say, they call your agent and they'd say, go for a Second City type. It was my naivete and my complete ignorance about what I was doing that enabled me to do this with supreme confidence. I never auditioned for a commercial before, and I got the first one. The first one I went out for. Turns out they wanted somebody who was 5 feet 6 inches in order to make the Datsun, because it was a Datsun car commercial, to make the car look bigger. One of the main considerations to get the job was that it made, I was short enough to make the car look bigger. And you can think about what you start to find out as your self-employed person, and you are your product. You start to find out. You start to find
do that too.
What it is that people want from you. You become a type, right? I became the short guy who was either always cast with a tall woman, because that's funny.
It's funny.
And could you imagine? Or the kind of downbeat fellow. And I had no idea this was my character, but this was the persona I was getting hired for.
Right.
And you go out there, and you're the guy in the commercial who can't find the opener, whatever the bottle.
So were you looking for more versatility with your performing, or were you upset that you were somewhat typecast in these commercials?
No, I was completely happy. I was just,
yes, of course. Yeah.
I thought I'd be getting Jack Nicholson parts, and instead Jack Lemmon parts.
Yeah. Well,
you have no idea what you have to be conscious of what you're giving out, right? Or what you represent.
Great advice. Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're using you to make money, and they wanted to know who we can get. Get me, you know the old joke, right? It's who's Jimmy MacKinley? Get me Jimmy MacKinley. Get me a Jimmy MacKinley type. Who's Jimmy MacKinley? That's everyone's career in a nutshell, right? You're unknown, then you're hot, so hot they look for people to do what you do, and then they forgot.
Look for someone like you. Yeah,
certainly. Later. No, I don't mean to sound like I was confused, because I was the tall, handsome, leading man type, and instead I was the short guy next door, the friend of the friend. And you have to be aware of what that. So if I wanted to expand beyond the image that I was giving off, I would have to say, take dancing lessons or take more acting lessons. I hadn't had an acting lesson in my life.
Right.
I shudder to say. And eventually that caught up with me. And this is where you have to keep changing and evolving what it is that you do best.
Yeah. Adaptable to your changing environment, much like ecosystem.
Yes, it got to the point where we were talking out of sync. It got to the point where I would look around Second City, and the oldest person in the cast with me was 28. The producers are pushing him to get out. There was nobody older. I had 4 years at Second City. Everybody.
And you were how old at the time?
24.
You're 24, right?
Yeah. So I'm looking around and I go, this is going to end. As great as it is, it's going to end.
Right.
I make the most of this opportunity, which was getting an agent, going out to auditions.
Yes.
And, getting ready for the fact that at 28, I would be too old to be on stage at Second City, right? So I had to use whatever I could get from Second City to start working on my post-Second City career while I was still at Second City. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. Yeah.
So part of that was auditions that you go to, right? And then I'd be working at Second City at night, but there'd be a lot of time during the day where, well, what am I going to do? Well, I could just fart around and not do anything.
Yeah.
I started writing, and I'd be write sketches because I was writing them for Second City, but then I started to write television show ideas or just write, because I thought writing was going to be where I was going to find my niche. I knew kind of that I was pretending at the acting gig. I kind of knew it doesn't take long when you start going to auditions and working with people on a high level of professional as performers or actors. People are way better than me. Way better than me. And I don't even know if I'd worked harder at it if I could have become a better actor. There's something,
Right.
I could have taken all kinds of classes and all that, but I thought acting really wasn't for me. So I decided to develop the writing side of it as I was going along.
Mm-hmm.
And that's eventually turned out to be more in my favor, because at a certain point, especially if you're not quite sure what your image is or what you represent to the people who are casting, I stopped getting every audition I went for. In fact, I would go like a year.
Do you miss it at all? Do you miss it now?
No, acting is
performing
so hard. It
is very difficult. Yeah.
People think anybody can do it.
Because I think we only see, you can see bad acting. Like when you're in a story and you're watching a story, it just looks so effortless. So people think, oh, they just, are saying lines that they've memorized. It's so much more than that. Yeah.
It's the hardest thing that I ever had to do. And thank God I didn't know how hard it was when I started out, or I wouldn't have been able to do it. I reached the point where I could get by on just being, dare I say it, clever, or, I wasn't getting into what really acting was, which is creating a character and connecting with people and doing, everything that really acting is. So I went into writing because I would rather write something that could be better performed than I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because writers have to be more self-effacing. There are very few famous writers, right? So if you're going in for fame, don't go in to be a writer. But if you want job satisfaction and have the people who are supremely good at doing this saying lines that you've written and making them 10 times better, that's where I went. And part of the
we are gonna have to, I'm getting a message. We've been talking for, I'm looking at my stove clock, I think we've been talking for 3.5 hours.
Okay.
So we're gonna move on to the last 2 questions. But I think that was great. I think people will learn something from your experiences and your transitioning from a performer to a writer. So tell us, I really want to talk about this. This is one of my father's favorite TV shows. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. How did you get involved with the Red Green Show? A show that I watched as a kid, a show that's
still playing somewhere right now.
Yeah, it's playing somewhere right now. You'll probably put it on. But tell us about how you got involved in that well-known Canadian production, Red Green Show.
So part of the most basic way was, I was when I was working at Second City, I graduated, or my time as an actor ended. While I was doing that, of course, we were having directors come in because we were putting up shows. And then I thought, okay, I'm writing a show, I'm acting in a show. I want to learn how to do this directing, because to me, directing, nobody sees you. You can be as ugly and as untalented as I am, and still work because nobody sees you. But you have to learn how to be a director, right? So I concentrated on that, and I learned to be a director by observing the directors that I was working with. When I was working with Del Close and Bernie Sullins, these are legendary Second City directors. So while I'm being directed, I'm making notes about directing. So so I'm writing. So one day, I get a phone call. No, actually, I'll go this way. I had a bad year one year. My house burned down, my mother died, and I got divorced. This was 13 months. It sounds like a country and western song. And I found out that I was getting divorced on the Friday. This was after the fire and after my mother had died. And I get a phone call on Monday morning from Red Green. And he goes, of course, he doesn't talk like that, but
that's probably the best in person. Well, a little bit.
Listen, Bruce, I need some writers I need a writer for the TV show. Can you come in on Tuesday and have a meeting? And I go, yeah, sure. How did you get my name and number? And he goes, if Patrick McKenna had told me one more time that I should hire you as a writer, I wasn't going to call you at all. Patrick McKenna, the Red Green fan, is cousin Harold.
Right.
who was a former Second City guy, he was the doorman when I was on stage at Second City. And when he got to be on the Red Green show and Steve Smith wanted to know who could be a writer, he recommended me.
That's cool.
Another thing about show business where there's a tendency to think that show business will put up with any kind of bad behavior if you're talented, right? You know, there's the thing about, you found it. Do jerks get ahead? You know, maybe in the short term, like I did, I got ahead. But you stand or fall by your reputation. If you're easier to work with, especially in writing, 9 jobs out of 10 you get because you're recommended by somebody who's already working there.
Yeah.
That's how you hear that there's a vacancy, that somebody has left the writing staff.
Yes.
And 9 times out of 10, any jobs I got was not through my agent and not auditioning. It was because I had a personal connection and a reputation with other people who got there. And
you built those connections. Built those relationships, nurtured those relationships, and showed that you could do it. And that what comes back to what we were talking about in question number 1, full circle, is the fact that, treating it like any other business. That's how people get, I don't know why I keep bringing up welding, but it's like, that's how, if you're a good welder and you've built those relationships, if you're a trades guy, you'll be recommended. You don't have to go on Career Beacon to find an opportunity. You'll be recommended for the opportunities that you're looking for. And
word of mouth goes around. Really, in the end, not a lot of people working in this business. And if you're a jerk, it's going to get around. And you have to think, and you are your business. So you don't go out and tick people off and behave like
we got to, it's a PG-13.
You're not going to get work. People will know, you will get a reputation, and a bad one. And it's a lot of personal connections, but it's when you've been doing it years and years, when you're in a van with somebody driving around Southern Ontario or Middle Ontario in the dead of winter in a van with square wheels with Mike Myers calls you back 8 years later when he's got a development deal for a feature film, and called me, and I went down to LA and I worked with him writing a script. It didn't get made, but that's more the norm than not. But he could have brought in anybody. And I'm not saying it was, you know what I mean? I'm trying to not sound fatuous about it, because he knew me.
Yeah,
and
you're reliable.
Together. You get, work creates work, right? You work with somebody, and when something comes along, they'll recommend you, and you will recommend somebody else.
Right.
And a whole other aspect to getting work in show business, that is personal connections and reputations. And that's how you continue to keep going, right? Was there something else?
I love that. We veered off, but I love where we went. We were talking about the Red Green show.
Oh yeah, yes. So Pat McKinnon calls me up, and so now I'm on the Red Green show, and I'm working there as a staff writer, and I was there for 6 years. And because when I started, I hadn't even watched a Red Green show,
right,
to starting, and I said to Steve, and I'm not a handy guy. I know nothing virtually except what I watched my stepfather do when he was doing carpentry like this. So Steve Smith quickly out that my forte was not changing a Volkswagen into a boat, but he said, "Oh, you're good at the character stuff."
Right.
Stuff. So I'm writing word games and what Steve called the wraparound. It was the story of the episode, which was Steve comes out and goes, "Oh, it was quite a day up at the lodge. Old weird hair." And all of a sudden, Pat McKenna comes running in. Uncle Red. We're going to lose the lodge unless insert problem here, right? They have to keep every...
Yeah.
Every episode was about them trying to keep the lodge from being closed, right? Yeah. Except for the one I came up with was the day they ran out of duct tape, which apparently That is. So anyway, I wound up doing this, writing this.
I've seen that one.
You know, it was like establish the problem, and Steve had this down. He had a formula. Start with this lobby scene, introduce the problem gets more complicated, the problem gets resolved. The 3-act structure of the Red Green Show.
Very formula, yeah.
In between, there were other things that were modular, right? You know, Adventures with Bill and Word Game, and you know, other things they would do like that. But I wound up working on the wraparound stories. And Steve Smith said, after I was there for 4 years, he goes, anything else you're interested in? I said, yeah, I'd like to direct some of these, the B-roll, when you go out, you know, when they studio and go out and do one of these Adventures with Bill or something like that. I said, I'd like to direct some of those. And he goes, well, all right. So now I'd moved up from staff writer to almost a head writer, although Steve Smith's the only head writer on the show, but I was getting scripts sent by other writers, and I was doing the first pass by on them and then sending them to Steve.
Right.
I could have done that, but a lot of this, once again, what are my other opportunities I can get out of this? And part of it, now I can direct television.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm directing these episodic things I do and creating a portfolio. And this is the other thing too, you always have to promote yourself. You have to be on IMDb. You have to create a director's reel. You have to make a reel of what your voice work is like. You have to send these things out, and you have to promote yourself. And you have to do it. Nobody's going to do it.
Nobody's going to do it for you.
So I've parlayed my meager talents of writing green, you know, lobby scenes. Now I'm directing television, and it's going out there, right? Which prepared me for my next career, which was directing episode or sketch television shows. And I worked on a series out in Edmonton for APTN.
Oh, yes.
Called
Caution may contain nuts.
Caution May Contain Nuts.
I remember it, yes.
Where a guy who moved to Edmonton, Dana Anderson, who I was on stage at Second City with, called me up and said, have you been doing any directing? Because they're looking for a director for this show. So the producers at the time, luckily I was down in Chicago directing a Second City show down there. They came down, talked to me. They looked at some of my director's reels, some stuff I shot on the Red Green Show. Next thing you know, I'm out in Edmonton co-directing 18 episodes of a sketch show. And I wound up getting nominated for a Gemini Award for the first TV series that I directed. Cool. There's that.
That's a pretty good resume. You know, mine still says I work at Canadian Tire from high school, so I have to update my my LinkedIn soon. We have been. I do have good news, though. I do have good news that Kat has given us an extra 5 minutes, so we can. We've got
all right,
about
I'll go to the
10,
bathroom.
Yeah, we've got about 10. Yeah, you're going to the bathroom.
All right. Well,
bathroom breaks are allowed. Luckily, I've been sitting on the toilet the entire time.
Yes, I have a catheter in.
We don't have those here in New Brunswick.
So then, before you know it, 30 years goes by like that. Okay. So I've gone from, recap, because part of it was I wanted to look in trying to create a career. You actually can create a career, not just as a friend of mine called it, a random series of unrelated job events. The other thing about show business is you're not even only as good as your last thing, right? Because your last thing may have been a while ago. You have to keep, you don't reach a certain plateau from which you can never backslide. You know what I mean?
Right.
I've done television commercials. Did I think that the next thing was going to be a television series I was going to be in? Well, yeah. So how does that happen? Do I just sit around and wait for the call? You know, you have to keep at it, and balancing act is not being a pain in the ass while you're doing it. So anyway, I'm directing television. I've been nominated for awards. I've done that. So this is where you're at. But it doesn't keep, you have to continue to keep at it, right? It doesn't
You have to be consistent and continue to grow.
Yeah, you can't just sit back and go, well, I've done it. I've directed a TV
Right.
series. I guess I'm only directing TV series now.
Sit back and wait for Martin Scorsese to call.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Or someone from Canada.
Yes. So then you're also pitching your own ideas. Now I know people like to know about that, I'm assuming. You also pitch because now you're working with people who have a track record, that are known. I could by now, and I think it's part of the nature of Canadian show business, is they're very approachable. If you think you've got a television show idea, the CBC, almost by mandate, has to listen to you. They have to give you some kind of a meeting, right?
Well, that's what's really interesting. And I do want to interject with a question that we had not rehearsed, or I did not send you this beforehand. Is there a formula for pitching a show? So for anyone out there who's watching this, listening to this right now on Zoom, or however they're listening to it, is there, in your experience, I know you've probably pitched many series to many different networks. Yeah. So did you find something that worked the best? And
I do.
And what can we learn?
As a matter of fact, I do. And
tell us about that.
I will share it as long as
we do have one more question after that. So
okay. When I was taking meetings when a television show is idea, the one thing you can't forget about a television show is it exists to make money for the people that put money in it. Okay. They just want things that are really good. There has to be, it's a business. Even they're working from a business point of view, right? If it's really, really good, then all the power to you. But I found to pitch a show, whatever it is, the people you pitch it to want to know 4 things. What's it like that's already on the air? Okay. There's the apocryphal stories about when something becomes popular, like remember the movie Die Hard? Then after that, everybody in every studio in Hollywood was pitched Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard at a school. It becomes a thing. So oddly enough, comparing what you're doing to something that's already successful helps you. Okay. They don't want to reinvent the wheel. They want to use the wheel that makes money. Okay?
Interesting, because that's the opposite of where I think that I used to think years ago. I love, you got to be completely original.
Well,
the characters.
Originality is, I'm speaking very broadly.
Okay.
One of the 4 sections is you have to convince somebody to part with millions of dollars. It costs millions of dollars to put on a television series. Do you have $1 million idea, right? If it's going to be something that they've not even heard of before, it's going to be a very tough sale. But if you
much of a risk,
it's like something else that's already been successful. You're more than likely to get them to go, tell me more. It's like Die Hard on a boat, or I love the show Schitt's Creek. It's Green Acres. You remember Green Acres?
Yes. Yeah.
Wealthy family loses their money, has to go and live in a small backwater.
They know that formula works.
Yeah, but it made it work was Eugene Levy, who's
everything else has to work.
And Catherine O'Hara, which is another aspect that you have to bear in mind. There are many elements to creating a television show. A good idea is only the start. Okay, I have to stick to my list. What's it like that's already been on the air?
Yes.
Been successful. Then you quickly follow that up with, how is yours different? It's like Green Acres, but it's a whole family. And it's going to have, a crazy characters. There's going to be a weird daughter and a crazy son. And it's going to have Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy in it. They're going to write it. That's what makes it different than Green Acres, right? And this is doable. They're signed on. They'll do it. Yes, they will do it. Okay.
I think people learn something from. Yeah.
Now, the other thing they want to know is, who's going to be watching the show? Who is the audience for this show? Because when they ask you who the audience for the show is, they also want to know who's going to get off their ass and go and buy the products that are advertised during this show?
Yeah.
Television is a medium by which you sell things. You can never lose track of that either. If you can deliver a consistent audience that has a demographic, the people link that up with their advertisers, and they say, there's a show coming up. It's going to be about, it's like Green Acres, but it's going to be Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy. Well, who are you going to get? We're going to get, I'm making this demographic up. We're going to get women from 35, from 18 to 35. And they buy all kinds of things like this. So there is both an audience for your idea,
right,
an audience for the products that are sold during your idea. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have, this isn't well, there's a degree of guesswork who's going to be watching. So just to recap, what's it like that's already been on the air? How is it different? Who is going to be watching this in the audience? And how do you get the audience to come back every week to watch this show?
Thank you for that. I think that those are great points. And a couple of them were surprising. So, you know, not a completely original idea. It makes sense because if someone's going to part with $1 million to produce your idea, you want to make sure that they're going to, you know, get that investment back through advertising. So that's, we're going to move on to the last question. We're going to try to keep this under 5 hours, this conversation. Okay. And we're going to pitch Die Hard on a boat as well after this. So we got some work to do on that, because that's probably the best idea I've heard. You are in recent years, you are working on a show that's broadcast on Hulu in the States, and it's, I believe, it's on Channel 4 in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Now, I'm not sure if there's a clip.
There is a clip.
There is a clip. You do have a clip.
Yes, just give me Tony, if you're listening, just let me set this up a little bit, okay?
Perfect. You're going to take care of it.
In never resting on my laurels, such as they are, I wound up teaching for the last few years. I've been teaching sitcom writing at Ryerson and sketch writing at Humber College.
Right.
And I was thought, well, that's how I'll play out my remaining coil. And I was teaching also at Second City. So I went down teaching sketch writing at Second City. I went there, and there was a bulletin board, and there was a notice on the bulletin board that said, out-of-town actor looking to have script reading. Volunteers requested.
So, a bulletin board.
On a bulletin board and a
babysitter.
Job for free.
Yeah.
When you're starting out, you have to do every job. You have to do everything for free, everything that comes along.
Yes.
So, but after 40 years, I thought, am I past the free part? Am I past that? But there was something about this one. The guy said he was from England. I always had a soft spot for British comedy.
Is that what stuck it? Okay.
Why not? I contact the guy. He wants to see a resume. And I think, oh, this guy's playing pretty friggin' hard to get for free, for a job he's offering for free. Anyway, I go in to see him along with a bunch of other people. We have the script readings. I'm giving him some suggestions. Sometimes you got to give it away for free. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yep.
And he says to me afterwards, could you stay? When everybody else left, he goes, you've done this before. I said, yes, I have. And he goes, I've never done this. I've got a development deal with Channel 4 in Britain. Could I hire you to be an advisor on this pilot script that I'm writing? And I said, yeah, okay. So all of a sudden free turned into a job in the space of 5 minutes, right? He was, and still is, an actor, a British actor named O.T. Fagbenle, and he's one of the leads of The Handmaid's Tale, which shot in Toronto, which was why he was there. And he wasn't content to just be in a huge multinational success story. He's planning on coming up with his own TV show while he's working on another TV show, which proves our point.
Yes.
Right? And if Tony is ready, anyway, we wound up, we wrote the pilot, and we got an order for 5 more scripts, and lo and behold, it was shot, and we're good to go. Tony, could you roll the...
I think Tony's still with us. I don't think he
What?
went to lunch yet. I think-
So anyway, it's going to start.
I just want to, sorry, if you don't know me, I'm Max, probably have a single coming out later this year.
When I first met you, you were dating this guy.
Yahtzee, thought you were dead. I'm making a comeback. Liked it better when you were dead. No tea!
You are a ridiculous human being.
I am not lonely, I am doing great. And I've got these dust allergies.
You're what, you're 40?
My playing age is 25 to 35.
I don't want to be cold, but really.
Max, Thursday at 10 on Channel 4 and stream the entire box set after on All 4.
And Kat says we're back on.
So
This
was
Zoom call,
hilarious, even if I said I didn't see it. But
that was the best clip I've ever seen in my entire life.
right.
It was just us staring at each other and not saying anything for 30 seconds, but I can't wait to watch it later.
So the wrap up on that was, I went over there and over to London and was treated like a king. And they know how to do that because they have them over there.
Of course.
And my favorite part of the whole thing was I showed up at this the day one of the days of shooting, and the producer introduced me and said to the assembled cast and crew, and this is Bruce Pirrie. He's one of the writers on the show. He and OT developed it, and he's here to watch and observe to see what we're doing with his work. And I'm going, oh, stop that. So then later on, about 5 hours later, I'm walking along through the set, and there's this gaffer who's carrying the huge load of equipment, and there's a door propped open, or there's a door that has to be kicked open. So he pushes open the door, weighted down with all this stuff, and I'm standing waiting for him to go through, and he goes, oh no, mate, you go through. And I went, oh no, look, obviously you go. No, mate, right. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have this job.
Right.
And there you go. Everybody's got a job, and it's a job. And you don't get that all the time. Writers don't get that much credit, but I was particularly, he might've been snowing me a little, but
It's definitely well-deserved in my opinion.
there we go. So it was a great experience and a great way to round out, which apparently now looks like a career at the end of it. Looking backward, it was all that easy.
Right. Is there anything that you're working on right now? We're just going to wrap up in the next few minutes and thank our loyal viewers.
There's waiting to see, if this is going to go for a second series. We're waiting to see a second season, rather. Waiting to see if there is going to be a television series. All of that, I don't know. I would hate to be starting out now because I'm too old to understand. But I'm sure that the young people who are out there, create your own opportunities.
Right.
Never forget that you are the one who's responsible for your career. Follow talent, not necessarily your dreams, and always look for ways to improve your talent or broaden your set to do that.
And even in a cynical time such as this coronavirus time right now, there's never been a better time to say, maybe I'll look at something else since this industry may not exist. But you know what? We do have a question from a watcher, and I do want to get to it before we have to cut.
Sure.
I'm just going to read it to you. Bruce,
Okay.
do you find ageism is a real problem now? So that was ageism, where older people's creative experience is not respected as much. That's one of our questions that we do have time for today.
Okay. Being who I am, I have not had to run into a lot of difficulties that other people have put up with. I mean, I'm a privileged white man, middle class, university educated, all that stuff. I had everything going for me, and that wheel is turning as it should, to bring around other people. Like, my day's over. I hope that my day's over. But in comedy, oddly enough, in particular, there is a certain degree of ageism. I can't say it affected me because OT, who's like 35 but plays 25, needed my experience because he'd never done anything like that before. So in that way, it became an asset.
Mm-hmm.
I've found generally there seemed to be a consensus among producers that comedians have to be 26 and a half years old, right? And that's okay if that's who your audience that you're going for, right? It's the idea of your television show idea is who's going to be watching this, right? It makes no sense for me to pitch, well, this is an idea that 25-year-olds are going to watch because I've got my daughter's 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be a degree of ageism just in that they think you're not au courant, because comedy always deals with whatever is current, right? Pop culture. So you would have to know all that. And I can kind of see their point.
Right.
I think that there is experience has some benefit to it.
Some weight as well.
Yes.
We do have one more
to
question.
balance it out. I don't think I'd get anywhere trying to pitch an idea about a group of crazy teenagers that live together in
I'd watch that.
a flat or something. It's not my strength either. Always always work to what your strengths are. And my strength would not be trying to write a contemporary comedy about a group of teenagers. You know what I mean?
And with all your experience and tenure in the industry, we do have one last question. Do you mentor people, specific people or groups of people? I know you mentioned that you were a teacher at Ryerson and Humber, but it's something that you do specifically with mentorship, with writing or performing, anything?
As a matter of fact, I'm
good.
currently working with some former Humber students, trying to work on an idea that we can do. I can't tell you what it is. There's a proprietary interest.
Well, come on now.
We're trying to figure out how we can do sketch comedy remotely recorded online and try and bring it together, that if and when this virus thing passes and we go back, we return to live comedy, they've got material. And if not, and this is the way things stay, we're trying to work out a way that we can make sketch comedy work remotely. You know what I mean? Like online, and how you can do that. And well, if we figure that out, we do it. So yes, but I'm mentoring people that I do have some experience with.
Right.
But yes, I would be very remiss if the people I've been helped along the way, because I went from zero to this.
Without connections or family.
And I only got this because people helped me along the way. So yeah, I do.
Industry.
Yeah.
Great. We're going to
find a lot of people will do that.
Yeah. No,
people are very open.
That's awesome. That's very good of you to do with all your experience, to share those experiences and knowledge with people who want to get into an industry that's very, somewhat seemingly difficult to, get their toes in. I certainly dealt with the same thing trying to get into comedy years ago. My father worked at the mill, so that was the only opportunity for me, it seemed. I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to thank Kat and Tony for having me partake in this conversation. And I think hopefully we learned quite a bit. I know I learned quite a bit. And to our viewers watching, I hope that they enjoyed this conversation. And is there any final words that you want to say? And then we'll send it back to Kat and Tony. I'm not even sure how to end this Zoom call. So
no.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to,
just pretend it's me 5 years from now, and we'll just pull the
thank you very much.
Thank you
to Bruce Pirrie for joining us today and sharing all your knowledge. We'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.